Good morning. Sorry to be a little tardy here for the office hours. I had some technical difficulties, but coming to you from Kansas City, Missouri this morning. So I appreciate your time with me, and I'm looking forward to being with you here. I have a slew of questions that have already been submitted, so I'm going to start with those. And if any of you have questions you want to throw in the chat, you feel free to throw those right there in the chat, and I'll be able to get to them. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Roy Moran. I am the chairman of the board of New Generations. I also operate the global platform for New Generations, which is a platform that allows indigenous leaders who want to explore what it means to make disciples who make disciples who make disciples and to build networks of disciple making. We are involved in assisting people to do that, much like the Airbnb platform allows regular people to become hoteliers to rent their spaces by climbing up on that platform. We have a history. Many of you know the book Miraculous Movements, the story of the New Generations team in sub-Saharan Africa. Now writing the second chapter of New Generations and Miraculous Movements as well. So thanks for being here. A couple of books I've got up there. Shameless promotion, Spent Matches. Hybrid Church just went audio in the Amazon platform. So if you're interested in listening to it, you can certainly do that. So I'm going to take just a few minutes here to kind of explain a couple of things. And then especially for those of you who are just starting, and maybe some of you who've been in the middle of it, you haven't experienced, or this concept might be helpful to you. But oftentimes I get questions like, why aren't there movements like you read in Miraculous Movements, or the numbers that you might see in spaces like newgenerations.org, when you go to the report section and you see the updates, and you see hundreds of thousands of churches, millions of disciples. Why aren't those kinds of things happening in the West? Um, and I would say there's a lot of activity that's going on in the West, but I would also say that we probably need to rethink ourselves when it comes to understanding what is it that we do, or maybe if I could put it, how is it that we do things? Um, and really the first thing I would say, or the biggest thing I would say, is that um, we've got to learn to fall in love with the problem, not the solutions. We as a Western people, a people who have sort of departed from a unity mindset. There is material and immaterial world in our mind. The two don't mesh together. So the spirit world and the physical world are really separate to us, and we are more prone to love the material world because we can manipulate things there. Um, so as a result, we tend to fall in love with the problem. Excuse me, fall in love with our solutions. And so we find and fix problems. And I would suggest that in this scenario, the way you motivate people, the way people keep persevering toward an end of planting disciples who replicate into generations, and those generations express themselves in redemptive platforms that we would sometimes refer to as use the word ecclesia, or unfortunately the word church in the English language is used for that. But these spiritual families that are redemptive platforms for God to be able to bring heaven to earth. Um, when you want to do that and you want to continue that perseverance toward that, it's really important. It's really important to understand that falling in love with the problem is probably more important than falling in love with the solution. Um, If you've ever been to any conference, any church leadership pastors conference in the West, the people that get up on stage are people who come with solutions. They come with a new technique or a new strategy or a new tactic or something, that they've started doing this or that, and they're usually selling something or promoting a book or something like that, and so you see this falling in love with the solution thing all over the place. At the core, though, I mean, at the very core of this is an understanding of the problem. And so, what is the problem? What problem are we solving for? And I would suggest that uh, the problem we're solving for is found in the heart of our Father. Now, let's think about this for a moment. Jesus in Luke 15 draws a picture of the heart of the Father, and he gives us a clear understanding. He first does it with two illustrations, one about a coin and one about a sheep. And it's a scarcity issue. I mean, there's 1 in 10 or 1 in 100, and the one gets lost. And so, instead of protecting the asset that exists there, the nine or the 99, Jesus' story promotes the idea that the God that we are attempting to relate to is intimately concerned about the one in such a way that he goes after the one, leaving the 10, leaving the 99. But then he caps it off by telling a story out of a human example of a son who betrays his father and goes off and takes half of the family fortune before the father's died now. He takes half the family's fortune and he goes off and he loses it. He squanders it and he decides to come home. It's this picture, I think, that we find. It's a picture that Rembrandt painted in the famous Return of the Prodigal. It's a picture that Jesus is painting for us about what drives disciple-making movements. I mean, why aren't they in the West? I would say that we have not yet learned to fall in love with the problem. And so again, begs the question, what is the problem? The problem is the son is lost, the coin is lost, the sheep is lost. The problem is in the heart of our Father is this ache for a connection with his children. He has children who are not yet in his family, and he wants them in his family. And so this beautiful picture in Luke 15 that Jesus paints for us is this picture of a father standing on the edge of town. One of the first things we do in the habits course is those of you who've dipped into it know that we look at Luke 15 and we look at that, especially that passage in 20 through 24 verses there, to understand where is the Father. And I think it's a legitimate conclusion from the text that he is on the edge of town. Luke simply says, the Father saw the Son from afar off. Was he there just on that lucky day? Um, every time the lottery in the U.S. gets up to $1 billion, I think about buying a ticket, buying a lottery ticket and thinking, what if? And so it's like one in a gazillion that I could win. But did the Father just buy the lucky ticket that day and decide to stand on the edge of town looking for his son? Or is Luke sort of giving us an idea that the Father's habit was to keep his gaze on the edge of town? The Father's habit was to look for his son on a daily basis. There was an ache in the heart of the Father for his son to return home. And so as Jesus is telling a story, I think he gives us an answer to the question, why aren't there movements in the West? And it's because we have not identified with the ache in our Father's heart. He's not just interested in us going out and telling people about Jesus. He's not just interested in us, upping our game in evangelism. He's not just interested in all these things that we try to do to get people into the kingdom. What he's interested in us is just sitting and and identifying with the lovesick heart of our Father. He is desperate. He's desperate to have his family together. In fact, if you would, ask yourself, what is God up to? What is God up to in space and time? I think you can build a case, and there's a very good book written with that title, What Does God Want? Um, and it starts and kind of helps us understand that God has been building a family from the moment that Father, Son, and Spirit entered space and time. They created the world. They created us. They created us in his image. And they did that out of the generosity of their heart. The beautiful dance that happens between Father, Son, and Spirit is a community, a triunity that they wanted to replicate in human form. And so they built us in their image, built us with this deep need for a sense of other people, community, a sense of family. And as a result of that, then we move down through the revelation and we see that that first attempt to build family with Adam and Eve was a failure. They wanted more. They wanted more than God had given them. And so they broke. They broke humans, they broke the earth, they broke everything. And as a result, God didn't give up. He chose Abraham and he began to work through Abraham as a nation to be able to say, okay, how can I create a vessel to bless this world, to create a family, a spiritual family? And we see the history of Revelation. It comes all the way down through the Son coming and living and dying and rising again and allowing us the opportunity to be able to be engaged in this process of becoming family. And it's beautiful. And Jesus, and John describes Jesus in John 1:12, this idea to as many as received him, to them he gave the right what to become children. And that received, that word lambano there, that idea of showing hospitality, that idea, this as many as invited him into his house, that old incredible little booklet, My Heart, Christ's Home, is really a picture of that idea that when I make my life, I make Jesus welcome in my life. I show him hospitality like I would, coming out of a Near Eastern mindset. It's that visitor comes in and they take first place, and all my attention goes to them, and we serve them. They're our honored guest, and so when John is saying when Jesus becomes the honored guest in your life, you become a child. You enter the family. You have the rights and privileges of being a son. And then Paul goes on to extrapolate that out into that concept of being joint heirs with Jesus, this concept of, Jesus was the Son of God. We become sons and daughters of God. And we have this privileged identity to live in. And that's what God wants. That's what he's after. That's what he desires. And so falling in love with the problem is vital to us understanding what it takes to be transformed at our soul level so that everything we do is about how do we give this away? How do we express the generosity that existed in the Father, Son, and Spirit? How do we express the generosity that God at his core is generous and wants to give away the life that exists, the power, the sense of everything that we would call godliness, which is that sense of being, flourishing as humans, fully human. God wants to give that away, and he wants to build these spiritually flourishing families that would have the opportunity to be redemptive platforms, to be able to extend that into every area of this world. As Jesus expressed in Matthew 28, this idea of having um, every ethne, every pocket, every space. And so God is about building a family. So again, back to the big question that's kind of driving this argument here is that what does God want? He wants us to help him get into to build his family. So God wants a family, and you and I get called into the family business. And so thinking about what we describe as the normal Christian life, the normal spiritual journey with Jesus, what we describe as that is it's like, okay, I get the privilege of being in the family, and I get the privilege of being in the family business because I'm identifying with the ache in my father's heart that his family is not yet here. And I think on a human level, it makes complete sense if any of us were able to see um, that if we were able to see this concept of understanding ourselves and seeing, what's happening in our world, we begin to see that um, we're in need of restoration. We're in need of transformation. We're in need of having things change inside us. And we feel our brokenness. We feel a sense of being broken and being needing fixing and those kinds of things. So as we move forward in this, we begin to see those kinds of things. Sorry for the interruptions. But as we talk about this idea of being involved in the family and the family business, the concept of falling in love with the Father's heart or identifying with the ache in our Father's heart and understanding that we have a lovesick Father who is desperate to find his children. And those children who are in the family, as they fall in love with the Father's heart, they feel that love sickness and they're affected by it and they get involved in the family business. That's not the normal way that people find themselves, coming into the family. It's generally I come into the family because I'm forgiven. The justification issues that exist in and around the cross, which are certainly absolutely essential, tend to be the most important things. And so we westernize the gospel in a sense by making it about me. It is about me, but I'm a means to an end. I'm not an end in myself. And so coming to grips with that, is really important. And building a culture that has that kind of identity as a child of the King is important. So falling in love with the problem becomes far more important than falling in love with the solution. And oftentimes I see people who get all giddy about when they hear this term discovery Bible study and or obedience based disciple making or all those kinds of words that we use to describe things. Those are the features. Those are the features. Those are not necessarily the things we need to fall in love with. Those are solutions. And if you fall in love with solutions, it does not drill deep into your soul. And so I would say, just as we kick off these office hours, I'll be here every Thursday, and these will be recorded. So if you'd like to see them, they'll be available. But the idea, of having a concept of falling in love with the problem, becomes an absolute necessity for things. So let me just finish off today by maybe answering a couple of questions. Everywhere I go, everywhere I've been, conferences and that kind of stuff, I always collect questions. People ask questions, and I've kept all those questions over the years and begin to catalog them and so that we can have this kind of database of things. So This question says, Roy, can you give us examples of engaging in lostness conversations? I would say that one of the problems that we have, especially as Western, maybe American, I'm not sure, but we're so concerned about telling people what we believe, and we think if we tell them what we believe, it'll make a difference. But but we've seen in this world, especially with the political situation that exists in the U.S., people are really not interested in what you believe. It's dangerous, and they don't want to go there. And so, when to engage in conversations with people who are lost, or just people, I mean, the idea that even we categorize people, it's kind of crazy. But what if our posture was one of curiosity? Let's think about this. What if our posture was one of not being the most interesting person in the room, but being the most interested person in the room? So what if my posture was one of exploration, of discovery, and I was asking questions of people. It's just like conversation. Hey, what gets you out of bed in the morning? What's the most satisfying part of your day today? And beginning to just learn to use questions to engage people, because as people, we're built for one another. Remember, we're made in the image of God, and so we're built for one another. And so as people, we have this internal draw, this gravity that pulls us toward each other. And I want to be known. I desperately want to be known, as you do too. And there's a part of us that's been damaged that I want to know, and that part. Oftentimes, when we think about Paul's admonition in Romans 12 to not be conformed to this world has conformed us to not know one another. And we need to get out of that. We need to be more curious than we are telling people what we think, our opinions, what we believe. In fact, in one of these sessions, we'll talk about, one of the basic precepts, I think, of leading and movements is the idea of I learn to ask and not tell. That is a absolute important thing. And if your first inclination is to tell and not ask, then I would tend to say that you are not a movement leader. You will have a struggle being catalytic. And by that, I mean, when I say catalytic, I mean that you can make disciples who make disciples without you, that you can have grandchildren in the spiritual journey, people who are not under your direct influence and are doing the same things at the same quality you were doing without you. I owe that to Harry Brown, one of my mentors, who really has championed that and brought that to the surface. And I think it's vital to understand. I think I quote Harry here by saying, if what you're doing doesn't include without you in it, you're not having a Great Commission conversation, or you're not involved in Great Commission activity. So I think that's vitally important. So, well, that's it for today. Hey, thanks so much for being here and being a part of this. Again, these will be cataloged, archived, and for people to watch. If you're watching this through Mighty Networks, hope you'll spread the word and invite your friends to be a part of this platform. We're trying to build a platform that allows the disciple-making movement strategy. We're trying to catalyze that thinking everywhere we can find. So thanks so much for being here, and I trust you'll have a great day.